In this video, we're going to learn 6 keys for effective training. Check it out. So for every module or training tool that we're going to roll out to our disciples and those we are training, there are 6 essential components that we need to have with every single module. The first is introduction. When you get up to train any tool, you want to have a very short introduction. So this is going to be the time frame in which it is trained. There are also questions for each of these to help you develop a module. So if I'm going to get up and share an introduction, what is the title of the tool I'm about to train? I'm going to be going back and forth with an example at this point of how to share a testimony. So if I'm going to train people on how to share the testimony, maybe the first thing I'm going to say when I stand up in front of people is that today we will learn how to share our testimony of how we began to follow Jesus. So that's very brief, very short, and that's the introduction. The second thing is we need to figure out what Bible study. We always want to root our tools in the Word. So not only the passage, but what are they going to discuss? What are the questions they're going to discuss to have a biblical foundation of what this tool is that we are about to train them? So going back into the illustration of testimony, the passage that we're going to be studying today is Acts 26, 1 to 29. Read this passage and ask the following questions. What was Paul's life before he met Christ? How did Paul meet Jesus? And what are the things that happened in his life after he met Christ? So I'm going to give you about 15 minutes to study this passage, Acts 26, 1 to 29, and ask the following questions. Paul's life before Christ, how he met Christ, and his life after he met Christ. You're going to give them a long time to study whatever passage that you've picked for that tool and what questions they're going to be asking. So the introduction, Bible study, and discussion. You want to give them a long time to discuss, and this is the adult learning style. You're not just teaching people what to do, you're teaching them really a different way of thinking and trying to shift a paradigm in their mind. And the only way to do that is to really take them to the Word and let them discuss and discover from the Bible what they are trying to learn and implement. So the next thing you want to do after they have a long time in the Bible passage asking questions is you want to get up and model something simple and memorable. And so the question here is, what is the tool? And when we go back to testimony, the tool in which we train them is we draw a clock and then an arrow before, and we put a cross in the center, an arrow forward, and then a question. So we teach this simple pattern here, and I would get up and say, hey, there was a time in my life that I used to be really broken and far from God. So that's my 2 characteristics before I started following Jesus. But then I heard about Jesus and I began to follow him. And since the time I started following him, Jesus has filled my life with purpose and joy. Do you have a story like that? So I would get up and I would model this very briefly in a short time of modeling. So what is the tool? The tool is this 15-second story. There was a time in my life before Christ, how I came to know Christ, and my life since I met Jesus. And you ask them a question, do they have a story like yours? So this is a simple tool that I'm going to model. And now maybe it's not a tool, maybe it's a story, maybe it's hand motions, maybe it's illustrations. Whatever it is, you want to model this briefly, and then again, you have a long period where they practice and they make plan to implement. So for practice, you want to ask them, well, what style? How much time do they need for practicing the testimony? So I'm going to have them pair up and practice for 2 minutes, and then I have them change partners and pair them again and practice for 2 more minutes. And I might do this 3 or 4 times, having them practice so that they can have enough of confidence and competence. Practicing with one another, likely other Christians, before they go out and share with non-Christians. So whatever the style is, maybe they're sharing a story, maybe they're needing something to draw. You want to give them plenty of time and write down how much time you need to give them to practice, how many times do they need to switch partners and make a plan for that before they go up and train. The final thing is to make a plan. So what is the goal and what are you wanting them to do? So again, if I was training in this module of how to share the testimony, I would ask them at the end, who will you share within the next 7 days? let's make a plan. Is this somebody in your Oikos map? Is it somebody at your workplace? Is it somebody that you're going to go out in your neighborhood and share with? So what is the plan? So with every one of the tools that we're going to roll out for these disciples, it's very important and helpful to have a one page similar to this sheet and say, okay, this is the tool title and this is the Bible study passage. These are the questions we want to ask during the Bible study. This is a tool illustration and maybe it's and symbols. So this is how much time they need to have to practice, and here is the goal to make an action plan. So if you have to think of these 6 effective keys of training, we think about a highway. In order to get down to the highway toward our destination, which is hopefully more leaders being raised to reproduce the Great Commission, to reproduce disciples, to reproduce churches, to impact lostness. If this is the highway, we want to take the long road and we don't want to take shortcuts. So maybe it's going to take additional time for longer Bible study, and maybe it's going to take additional time for practice. Well, if you skip out on Bible study and you skip out on practice, what are you left with? You're left with maybe something that they can't reproduce, maybe something that they don't have a foundation of the tool in the Word, maybe because they didn't have enough time of practice. A lot of times when we maybe think that people we are discipling are not reproducing something, it might not be because the tool is bad, or it might not be because the Bible study is bad. Maybe we have just skipped one of these things. Maybe we didn't give them enough time to practice. Maybe we didn't root them in the Word. Maybe we didn't have a good time of discussion with questions. Maybe we did not model it to them. And that's the reason we're not able to reproduce. So maybe we just got up and we preached for an hour and then they didn't know how to do anything. And they're not able to reproduce. So ask yourself the question, with all of your modules that you train in your discipleship process, in field 1, field 2, field 3, field 4, field 5, is there a simple format? Is there a simple introduction? Is there a Bible study that goes with it? Is there discussion, questions? Do you have something that you're going to model for them that's very brief that they can reproduce? How long do they have to practice that? And what's the ultimate goal you're wanting them to do with that? So this is the 6 keys for effective training, and I hope that you would take your training toolbox, push it through this filter and ask yourself, have you been able to narrow down all the tools that you're training in these 6 effective keys so it can be reproduced until there's no place left?